We're not creating oxygen here. I heard this quote from Adrian Dorison, the founder of the Run Like Clockwork program, a while back, and it made me chuckle. But it was also a good reality check. A major productivity trap is believing that everything on your to do list is equally important and equally urgent. But that's just not true. Chances are you're not creating oxygen in your job, and those tasks aren't emergencies all of the time. In this episode, I'll explain why acting like every task on your list is urgent or of maximum importance takes a toll not only on your productivity, but also on your brain and body. Okay, let's dive in. A few months ago, I was taking this boot camp from Adrian Dorison, the founder of the Run Like Clockwork program, which is a program focused on improving productivity and efficiency for small business owners. And she was telling this story about how many years ago, when she was working for a company, they were always called in, sometimes in the middle of the night, often on weekends and on their days off, for something that was urgent. And she's telling the story about how she's there in the middle of the night at whatever job this was she was doing because her supervisor or boss had called her and her colleagues in to respond to something that needed to be done right that minute. And her colleague is standing next to her and says something like, "Why are we in such a rush? It's not like we're creating oxygen here." The story is very funny, and I loved how she shared how it brought into perspective just how urgent or not so urgent some of those tasks are that we put on our to do list. But we often respond that way, right? Like everything is urgent, like our jobs are creating oxygen for the world, when in reality, most of the tasks that we have on our to do list don't need to be done right this second. They probably don't need to be done in the middle of the night when you wake up and you think about that thing that's been on your mind for days, or on the weekend when you're supposed to be spending time with family or relaxing. But we go into this mindset of feeling like we're creating oxygen and everything is urgent or needs to get done right now. The story reminded me of one of my very first jobs in university, one of my first summer student jobs. I was working in this warehouse at a local metals plant. So, my job as a student, there was me and one other student. Our job was to fill orders for parts that came in from around the plant. So, this was a long time ago. So, I'm not sure if it was a fax machine. It might have been a fax, but it was some type of computer system where, for wherever the person was in the plant, they would put in their parts order. It would print out on the printer in the warehouse. We'd get that order, we'd fill it, and we'd have it ready when the worker came in to pick up whatever tools or parts they were needing. And I'll always remember there was one person, I remember his name, but I won't shame him by saying it here, which is actually saying something because this was like 20 years ago that this happened. And I still remember his name because reliably, no matter what he was ordering or needed to pick up, he would put on the top urgent. And often it would be like one screw or one bolt. And not only would he say that this is urgent, he would put in these urgent requests multiple times a day. So we'd all chuckle and kind of roll our eyes to ourselves when this person's order would come in because we'd know it's not really that urgent. And he was going to have another urgent request probably an hour from now. But we would go get the order for the one or two little nuts and bolts, have them ready for him, and he would rush in because it is urgent in his mind, right? Pick up that part, rush back to whatever he was doing, and it would go on and on all day, all summer long. Like I said, I think this fellow had been doing this for years because all the regular warehouse workers also knew his name and knew to expect these urgent requests. The thing is, you can see how this is really inefficient, right? So this fellow is putting in these urgent requests every hour or so. He's stopping what he's doing. He's going to pick up that one or two parts that he needs, coming back to do the same thing over and over and over again. So not only is he taking up my time as a summer student, because I have to drop what I'm doing to fill this urgent request, but he's not very efficient on his end because everything is urgent or immediate. So he's stopping what he's doing, getting distracted, using up time to go get those parts, when perhaps a little bit of pre-planning, he could do 1 or 2 orders a day instead of 10 urgent orders throughout the day. We've probably all been in these situations before, right? That boss that drops that stack of papers on your desk and says, I need this in an hour. Everything is urgent. Everything is pressured. And we know in our minds that not everything is actually urgent. I knew that that fellow wasn't going to burn the plant down if he didn't have that one tiny bolt, especially when he'd ordered something similar just a few hours ago. But we put that pressure on ourselves. Again, sometimes that pressure comes from our colleagues, from our supervisors, from that guy that's putting in the urgent orders all the time, that boss that's dropping work on your desk all the time. But often that pressure also comes from ourselves. We have these massive to-do lists with 40,000 things on it. We know realistically we don't have enough time in the day to actually get through it all, but we feel that pressure. Our brain goes into this overachieving and perfectionist mode. We start to worry about those 400 things that are on the list. Everything feels urgent. It feels like we're never going to have enough time. And no matter how much you check off that list, you're always playing catch up because it feels like there are things that we can't cut, that all of it needs to get done, that all of it is equally important. But the reality is that's likely not true because our priorities shift. Sometimes throughout the day, sometimes throughout projects that we're working on, sometimes throughout the year. Stick around for a few minutes and I'll share one strategy that I use to help my brain prioritize what's actually urgent and needs to get done. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about why this view or mindset that everything on your to-do list is equally urgent and equally important is actually a problem. One, as you can guess, that is super overwhelming. If I have 20 things on my list and I look at it in the morning and I say, oh my gosh, all of these things are equally important, I have to get all of these things done, that is so overwhelming, right? Because in reality, I probably only have enough time to get 5 or 6 things done. So what does that mean for the rest of the tasks? Well, my brain says I'm not working hard enough, I'm lazy, I'm not good at my job, or whatever other mental nonsense and stories that my brain wants to come up with to explain why I'm not getting through all those urgent tasks. The other trouble with feeling like everything is urgent is when something comes up that's actually urgent, it's just adding more fuel to the fire, right? Unexpectedly, your car breaks down, but your schedule is packed so tight that you don't have 15 minutes to wait for an Uber or for your spouse to come pick you up to drive you to work. And so you get to work and you're already feeling behind, right? When our schedules are packed, when we feel like everything on our list is a must do, is equally important, it leads to less productivity in the long run because we're stressed and burnt out, but also because we end up jumping from task to task. Because my brain says, oh my gosh, this other thing is super important. I better work on that. Oh no, I got to work on this. Oh no, I got to work on that. Oh no, this new distraction came up. You see where I'm going here, right? And this has probably happened to you before as well. The second problem with believing that everything on our to-do list is equally urgent or equally as important is it leads to a chronic stress response in our body, which is really tough over time. Your body and brain is designed to respond to urgent stresses. You've probably heard of the fight or flight response before. That's your brain's innate, natural response system to deal with danger, to deal with threats, to deal with urgent situations that come up. If I walk into a room and my daughter is playing on the couch and all of a sudden I see something flying towards me out of the corner of my eye, my fight or flight response is going to kick in. My brain is going to go into that respond to this urgent threat mode. My heart's going to start beating faster. My breathing's going to change. Bunch of blood's going to rush to my arms and legs so I can move faster. Even my vision's going to change so I can react and dodge out of the way of whatever has gone flying towards my head, usually some type of stuffed animal or thing that she's throwing around the room, right? It also happens if you're ever out and all of a sudden you catch a car coming towards you out of the corner of your eye. Or for our ancestors, if some giant bear jumped at us out of the woods, that stress response, that urgent response, is designed to kick in to get you out of danger. The trouble is, while this works really well for things that are actually urgent, in our modern world, our brains have determined that everything is urgent. It's not just that bear or that flying toy that we need to watch out for. It's that email that needs to be responded to right now. It's that permission slip that needs to be signed. It's that grocery list that needs to be taken care of, or those piles of laundry, or that project that you've been procrastinating on at work. Our brain views all of these things as equally urgent. So instead of that normal fight or flight stress response kicking in, helping us deal with the crisis, and then turning off, that stress response stays activated in your brain, which means that you're feeling rushed and pressured all the time. So we don't get that chance to relax or have our body's natural calming systems bring down some of that stress, which means the stress builds in our bodies and our minds. And we can even develop what are called somatic symptoms, or physical symptoms that we develop in response to this chronic stress. Things like muscle tension. You notice that your shoulders are super tight, or your back is bugging you all the time, or you're getting more headaches than normal, or your stomach is dealing with lots of indigestion and issues. You're not sleeping as soundly as you'd like. And to compound things and make matters worse, all of this chronic stress response makes us less efficient. So my brain says everything is urgent, but I have way too much to deal with. My body goes into this chronic stress response. I'm not sleeping. I'm not using up my resources very efficiently, which makes me even less efficient. So I get less done, and that stress response continues. Sound familiar? So, what can you do about this? How do you get your brain out of that habit of thinking that everything is urgent? How do you convince yourself and your brain that you're not creating oxygen here, that some stuff doesn't need to be done right now, that the world is not going to end if I don't check off everything on my to do list, even though I know it feels that way? Let me walk you through one scheduling strategy that I use to help my brain make some of these decisions a little bit easier about what's urgent, what's priority, and what isn't priority, at least right now. You know, I love scheduling, right? And I do a lot of pre planning to make my weeks more efficient. One of the things that I do when I'm scheduling is I color code my schedule. Partly it's because it looks nice and I like looking at it, but it also helps me keep track of what tasks fall into which category. For example, in my work, I still run a clinical practice, so I have tasks that are related to my client work, related to report writing, things that I need to get done for my clinical clients. I also have my consulting, my education, my online business, like this podcast. And so those tasks are coded and colored differently than my clinical tasks. I also have weekly tasks that I do every week, things to keep my business running, the things that keep us running smoothly so nothing gets left behind, things like updating my schedule, keeping track of tasks, and all of these things are different colors. Part of the reason that I do this is it makes it easier for me to set priorities in my schedule. One of the things that I do every day before I shut my computer down for the day is I plan my next day's schedule. So I open up my calendar and I take a look at all those color coded tasks and I see what are the things in my schedule that are a must do. What really are those urgent tasks that can't be moved? Things like client calls or appointments, patient work that I need to do in my clinic practice, for example, would often fall under those must get done that day. Then I'll have other tasks that are nice to get done if I have time, but if they can't get done today, I can move them to some other time, like paperwork or recording these podcast episodes or making social media posts. And by color coordinating my schedule in that way, it makes it really easy for me to take a quick look at my schedule for the week. And then if something unexpected does come up, I know what I can shift. Having a strategy like that color coding strategy will allow you to more effectively and efficiently determine what really is urgent and what isn't a priority right now. Maybe it's a priority down the road, but it's not a priority today, which means I can take it off my schedule or move it to some other day. This episode is brought to you by my free workbook, Your Daily Productivity Checklist. Ever wished you had more time in your day? This free workbook will walk you through the steps that I use to set up my day to maximize productivity so you can get more done without feeling totally overwhelmed or staying up all night to squeeze it all in. You can download your copy at drnicolebyers.com/checklist. That's drnicolebyers.com/checklist. Okay, let's do a quick recap of what you learned in this episode. You learned that our brains have this tendency to count everything on our to-do list as urgent. Sometimes that pressure comes from outside of us, from our boss or employers, from our family and friends that make us feel like everything needs to get done right now. But sometimes that pressure comes from us, from that tendency towards perfectionism or overachieving or setting ourselves to crazy high and sometimes unmanageable standards. But the truth is, most of the time, we're not creating oxygen. Everything isn't as urgent as our brains make us feel. And by being really clear on what's urgent or priority right now, it can take off some of that mental load and that stress of believing that everything on your to-do list has to get done, because that's just not true. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. Nicole Byers, and this is the Bold Life Podcast.